I recently went home for a family celebration and I got completely triggered on something that I thought I had completely healed. And so it was really surprising. I was not being prepared for this at all. And all of a sudden, around a dinner table with a lot of people, here I am crying, and the person I had the argument storming off. And it kind of created a scene, and it's everything that I really don't like. I do not like to create a scene. I don't like things to be dramatic. And so I wanted to share this video because I learned a lot during the process. I kind of understood what was happening. I also have some tips for you because the holiday season is fast approaching, and it usually means that we're gonna go and spend more time with family or be in situations with people who know exactly which buttons to push, to have you get triggered. And I wanted to share what I learned about this process, like why I was triggered, and also share some tips on what to do, first of all, to not get triggered, but also what to do if you are triggered so that you can move out. So let's dive in. So for me, what was really crazy is that I've been doing so much inner work, so much things, going to therapy, but also like inner healing, doing a lot of inner healing and personal growth. And I really thought the issue that came up around the dinner table had been completely behind me. And so when all of a sudden I got triggered and I ended up crying and making kind of a scene at a dinner table with a lot of people around it, I was really surprised. And it made me really think about the situation and try to figure out what had happened. But the thing is, what I learned was that, first of all, just because I was getting triggered didn't mean that I was actually regressing. Because that was the first thing, the first thing that came up to me was just feeling really disappointed in myself and kind of also really surprised and a little bit like, oh my gosh, like I've done all this work and I'm still in this position. But what I came to realize afterwards was that actually one of the reasons that I did get triggered and one of the reasons it kind of got into a fight was that I actually was expressing things that in the past I was too maybe shy or scared to express my opinions about. And this time I was actually stepping up and speaking out and kind of like expressing my point of view on something. And sure, I might not have done it perfectly well. It came out messy. It might have come out even aggressive. It wasn't probably my highest way of acting. But at the same time, if I look back on who I was, perhaps maybe even just a couple of years ago, I'm not even sure I would have had the guts to speak up. So in a way, the fact that I got triggered and that whole mess came out is in a way a kind of proof of healing and a kind of proof of progress. So if you do go home for the holidays and you do get triggered, maybe try and see it and see if your reaction is different. The other thing that I realized is that, as I had mentioned, I thought I had healed this huge wound that was something that was coming up. But what I realized when it came back up is that it wasn't completely healed. I have been doing so much work on it and so much inner growth and healing, but it doesn't mean that like there's still a little part of that pimple that needs popping and still needs addressing. And so actually, as hard as it was and kind of as embarrassing as it was, I realized that in a way, it was also shining light on some of the things that I still need to address. And so that too is a positive thing. But now I want to share some tips on what to do, first of all, not to get triggered, and then also what to do if you do get triggered. So the first tip is notice the trigger. Okay, in my case, I actually didn't notice the trigger. I really felt as if somebody pulled the rug from under me and all of a sudden I'm crying at a dinner table. I was like, what happened? But I feel like I did have some little signs come up. Like I remember when the conversation was starting to go in a certain way, I was like, like in the past, this conversation never really ends up in a good place. Maybe I should just not participate and, just like take a step back. I don't need to get into this position right here, especially in front of people. Like, yes, as I said, there were things that needed to be said, but it was needed to be said to one person, not in front of the whole group. So I do wish I had listened to that initial little trigger and noticed it before I got kind of like caught up in this whirlwind where I couldn't really control my emotions anymore. So yeah, if you can, first tip, notice the triggers, notice that you're getting triggered, and then move on to the next steps. If, like me though, you can't do that and you kind of just get triggered and all of a sudden you're in like a weird situation where you're either having a fight with somebody or a discussion or that you're just having these really crazy emotions, that's okay too. Take a breath and then you're going to be able to regroup afterwards as well. But if you can, try to notice the trigger and maybe take a step away. Because that's the second tip. The second tip is take some time alone. Me, for example, after this fight, I was actually taking a couple of days away from the family anyway on a small little trip outside of the family home. So that actually gave me that ability to like get some space from the situation, also vent in my head. I had a lot of other things that I wanted to say and that I just felt this anger, and I just, taking that step away though was really helpful because it just meant that it wouldn't escalate. And I get it. Sometimes when we go home, we're staying with our families, we can't actually really take a step away. We can't go away for 2 days like I was able to do. But we can sometimes go for a walk around the house, or even if you can't, go back to wherever you're sleeping and take a little moment for yourself. Do some breathing exercises, do a little meditation, maybe actually journaling. That is something I did on my 2 days away. I journaled. I just needed to get a lot of this stuff out, and it really helped. Go to the coffee shop. And again, if you can't do any of these things, go to the bathroom. Go to the bathroom, lock the door behind you, and just sit on the toilet and just take a moment for yourself. Because if you're realizing that you're getting triggered, again, if you were able to notice it, or even if you're not, take that time alone is really going to be helpful, just to like pause the energy and not have it escalate. The third tip is to continue your healthy habits and all the kind of like daily activities that you do to ground yourself and keep yourself calm, and all the things that you do spiritually for yourself. Keep doing them even when you're on holiday. It's actually something that I did not do, and I really wish I did. Because as soon as I got home, I kind of was like, oh, I'm on vacation. I'm not going to meditate. I'm not going to do my yoga. I'm not going to do my daily routines and my rituals that I do to kind of ground and calm myself. And it really had an effect. The fight that happened was like 2 or 3 or 4 days later after I arrived. And I'm sure if maybe I had just continued my daily practices of meditating, doing a bit of yoga, and also just taking some time for myself, again, taking some time just to breathe and recenter myself, I really think perhaps I wouldn't have gotten into that situation, because I would have been in a better place, a better grounded place, maybe a higher vibration where I wouldn't have been called to go back to some of my old habits. And the fourth tip is going to be a tarot tip, as always. Ooh, interesting. We got the Fool. And I find that that is such a great card to get here, because the Fool, in a way, is the first of the major arcana, and it's the Fool's journey that we follow. And the Fool basically goes through all these things and then comes around, and once it's learned a lot of things through its journey, it comes around and it is the Fool again. We keep going through cycles of being a fool to learning things to then coming back. And I find that it's such a great metaphor for what we do when we're doing our inner learning and spiritual growth and kind of like learning about things and healing. It's not linear, and it's not in one straight line that's going up. It's more circular. So the fact that like you go and you show up, and maybe you get triggered, and maybe you have a reaction like you used to do, but then you learn and you go around, and then maybe the next time you might get triggered again, but you stand back up and you come around and you show up again, and you have that kind of like beginner's mindset, and where you keep trusting that you're actually making progress. But I also think that there's something, and there's another wonderful tip that's coming from this card, because the Fool is basically somebody who's about to jump off a cliff, jump off this little branch. Is going to take that risk. And sometimes that's what we do when we go home. We kind of like take a risk of, first of all, being triggered, but also taking a risk in doing something a little differently. Maybe it's about trying a different reaction to the trigger. You can try so many different things, and it's about taking that risk and doing something a little bit different, and being curious to see what's going to happen, to have that beginner's mindset. In my case, for example, I was a little bit like the Fool, in the sense that I was trying something a bit different, stating my opinion, or, really trying to say something when usually perhaps in the past I would have just stayed quiet. And it was risky, and it didn't really go exactly how I planned, but even if it was messy, I really do think in the end, the outcome of the whole situation was really good. Because I also realized that afterwards, it enabled me to initiate a conversation with that person and get to the bottom of things. So even though the trigger and the mess and the fight and the crying and the storming out and that drama that I didn't really like wasn't really what I wanted, in the end, it was good. And it came kind of from taking a risk and doing something a little different. So I think this is a wonderful reminder that when you go home, remember that you're the fool, and remember to take the risk, but also remember that if it doesn't go exactly how you want, you can just come back around. And when you learn through that cycle, whatever you learn from your trigger and being triggered and the way you react to it will actually be a wonderful cycle that you will be able to then integrate into yourself and the way you are, not only with your family, but probably with others too. So on that, I'm wishing you a wonderful holiday season. I really hope that you're going to be able to deal with your triggers and being triggered, or also just avoid being triggered the best you can. The last thing I want to leave you with is just to be compassionate and caring to yourself. I know in my case, I was a little hard on myself right after. I was kind of beating myself up, thinking, why? How could I do this? I'm not doing it right. I'm like messing up. I'm going backwards. But you're not. And if you can be compassionate to yourself while you're being triggered, and also afterwards, even if you didn't have the perfect reaction, that's okay. You'll be learning from that too. So as always, I'm wishing you lots of love, lots of laughter, happy holidays. And let me know how these tips help you, and if you're able not to get triggered. I'd love to hear. See you soon.